I'm little. There you go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Hairyman, Hoaxes and Hoodwinks. I am so glad you're all here for tonight's show. It's going to be epic. I just know it. If we can just calm down and breathe, everything will be okay. So let me see what we got. We got a growing crowd. Good to see everybody here. Donald and Sandra and Jen. Gary, good to see you. Just everybody. I'm not going to go through the whole list right now, okay? We're just going to go ahead and get started with tonight's show, which is The Path to Flesh and Blood. And I know some of you want to hear about it, and some of you are like, again? Yes, again. Let me just get it out of my system, and then I can move on. So with that, I'm going to bring on my co-host for this evening first. And if I can find where I put his, there he is. Leon, thank you for coming tonight and being my support for this evening. Uh-oh, muted. You muted yourself. It muted.
hug. I was wondering, sure, yes. Quiet all of a sudden.
Yeah, so glad you could be here and help me get through this.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
This was quite tricky. It was a lot of reading and going back and taking notes because, you know, I want to make sure that I know what's going on and the way I structured tonight's show. So, but it was still very enlightening, and I'm glad I decided to do it. And with that, I'm going to bring on my guest.
Hey.
Kevin Harter, welcome. So glad you're
here.
Good
to be with you.
Yes, and we're getting a full house. It's look like it's growing. It is growing. That's what we want to see. So let me move that over there. And tonight, you guys, we're going to do a little bit of a take on kind of like what Steve had on his show, Squatch DTV, when Kevin was on there and talked about some things happening with certain individuals in the community, talking about, you know,
I have a better microphone this go around. That's really that's really the main reason I really wanted. I mean, I begged to make this show happen just so I could like reiterate a few things with a better microphone so that you can actually hear what I'm saying.
He's like, I'm all ready. I got a microphone.
I'm so grateful to you for allowing me on your show, and I'm grateful to Leon for being here on short notice too. Bigfoot Okanagan has been an inspiration to me over the last few years. Actually, honestly, that's no BS. Bigfoot Okanagan has been a big force in my thoughts.
Thanks, man.
That's great. Yeah,
and then and then one day you said something that I really disagreed with, and I had to stop watching you for 6 months.
I know, that's how I operate. It takes a while for ideas to simmer in people, you know. So then they go, "Oh, wait a second, this is not exactly the way he was talking about it." But.
Yeah, that's Well, I hope I'm not. I hope I don't out myself as being a complete naive freak before the show's over. So
that's why I'm here, Kevin. I get to do that for you.
Yeah, he's
here to learn. Here to learn. That's the key part.
So we are going to move ourselves around here.
All right. I like this configuration.
Just in case you are wondering out there in the chat, things are going to be changing here on my channel. So a little bit at a time, you're going to start seeing new stuff. Okay. Backgrounds are going to start changing, and that my little character down there, it's a girl now, and her name is Sass. Down. And things like that. Okay, you guys are going to start noticing, and I'm going to go more into this near the end of the show and tell you what's going to happen. It's going to happen sooner than I thought, because I'm ready. So, okay, so here we go. The path to flesh and blood. And Mr. Kevin Harter, you're a graduate of Duke University. You completed your majors in philosophy and anthropology. And I read that you aren't sure you're going to go possibly for your doctorate. Maybe.
I wish I had gone into a doctoral program a long time ago. And instead I got into this master's program in folklore at UNC, which was all good. But right after that, I got into teaching, and I kind of developed a severe teaching habit, actually, and that and the particular situation I was in, a semester of income versus a semester of paying tuition. The income proposition always won out with me, and I was fortunate that I got into like a very relatively pleasant teaching gig, at least for someone of my sensibilities, teaching great works of literature for about 19 years or close to that.
Wow!
And my version of that course was really broad, starting with ancient works, especially starting with Plato and Plato's Republic, and the syllabus kind of grows organically out of that beginning, which could lead almost anywhere. But actually, species was one theme that I tried to develop in that class, because Plato's philosophy is kind of the first, maybe not the first, but an early installment in the discussion about what are things and what things exist independently of us and stuff like that. And Plato was really into geometry, and geometry kind of points out some interesting connections between things that seem to be independent features of the world, even though, I'm gonna get all too philosophical and abstract now, and so never mind about that. But yeah, Plato's forms, famous early version of Western metaphysics, and in other words, and he was heavily influenced by geometry. And then Aristotle, next generation scholar, next generation. They're not that they were related, but they were in the same place and looking into a lot of the same things. Aristotle applied a lot of what Plato had to say toward more specifically to the biological world. And so usually, even though it's the same word, it's usually translated as species for Aristotle, because he's referring specifically to the biological world, and Plato was using a more general meaning, but it's actually the same word, eidos, which you could think of as idea. So the idea of a triangle, or the idea of a species. So Aristotle had a lot to say about how species are, how they work. And he agreed, or he was sort of in agreement with the general ancient idea that they were eternal and everlasting things. So in the ancient world, it was heavy emphasis on the idea first, and the actual flesh and blood animal is trying its best to become whatever the ideal of its being is, but it's the idea that exists apart from them what they're really trying to be. Like, you know, like a triangular object is, it's going to adhere to those properties of the triangle to the extent that it's actually triangular. Anyway, so that actually what Aristotle got into actually fit really nicely with the Old Testament Genesis depiction of creation separately, right? Creation of each. It gives the impression that each species was created separately. And Aristotle supported that idea, or actually it's the other way around. The church adapted Aristotle's work to support their worldview, which included the idea that species are eternal and everlasting things, and they don't change. And really that idea supported by the church was the default kind of position, the reigning intellectual position for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, until Darwin. And if Darwin hadn't changed it, there were other people that would have done so also. It wasn't dependent on just the one person, but Darwin was the first guy to publish a coherent explanation of how, even though these categories seem to be eternal and everlasting, actually they're changing very slowly, and it takes a long time for the changes to accumulate. And this process is hard for us to see at our particular level of interaction. Right, we need more time. Really, most of the time, that's the problem. Is we can't really definitively answer some questions about species that are contemporary questions. But it's a lot easier to answer questions about species that, you know, are extinct and have been extinct for a long time, and you can show on the timeline where you can find fossils and how long they go on, and where, you know, you can approximate how many years it lived, and etc. if you have fossils to work with. But of course, for the forest people, there are very few fossils, if any, to go around, and so we don't have that. We don't have that really important aspect of evidence to work with. But
and we all, you know, and that's what we are looking for, is evidence, is anything that would support the notion, or aside from those who have seen Bigfoot, you know, but that rest of the world that hasn't, who, you know, needs evidence to substantiate, you know, there being this new creature in the world.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in the essay, I'm not presenting any new factual information, no new data, nothing like that. So it's just really more speculation. But I'm trying to explain that one position that has been discounted really has not been considered adequately. And so in other words, I think there's been a lot of frustration, at least that I have noticed in the groups that I'm part of, or that I pay attention to when I'm able to. A lot of frustration, not understandable sort of frustration, but I think there's been more progress, or just from where I'm standing, it seems like there's been more progress than people are generally aware of. And especially with this DNA situation, I think there has been a lot of frustration that has arisen because of the supposed or perceived failures in DNA research to find Sasquatch DNA. Right, where is it? We keep getting something else, or we keep getting something unknown, or what, you know. So that's been very frustrating for a lot of different people. And there is actually, so what the essay tries to explain is that there's actually a very well known, if not, it's not as well understood as it is well known, biological mechanism that would produce exactly the kind of mitonuclear discordance that the Ketchum project describes. and which seems to be so. What? Let me start back up there. Mitonuclear discordance, meaning the mitochondrial DNA and the nuclear DNA seem to be in conflict. Single organism with mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA, which do not appear to match. Right, and that's one ongoing question with Sasquatch genetics, such as it is. Is there the pattern of mitonuclear discordance that is described in the Ketchum study, and they do use that word in the in responses to peer reviews. They do talk about the discordant.
And I'll cover DNA. That. We're definitely going to cover all that. I think, though, before we head into,
sorry, I'm veering off on tangent,
buddy. Yeah. I want to know, is something that I hadn't heard before was your encounter, that you yourself had something happen that you couldn't explain. And see, now it won't go because there we go.
Oh my goodness.
I had to show everybody you in Cranberry Glades, West Virginia.
Wow.
And you heard something happened. And I want you to tell that story, because I find that interesting. I mean, that
used to be James Madison, statue of James Madison there, but he's gone.
I took him out. I said, and it's out of there, buddy.
It's Sasquatch Waldo. It's Waldo Squatch.
Yeah.
That's excellent. But that actually is the boardwalk at Cranberry Glades, West Virginia, which is a unique botanical area. I wish I could remember all of the exact technical terms, but it's similar to the Adirondacks. It's like it's a little tiny spot of habitat way down in West Virginia, but it's similar to the Adirondacks. It's actually a quagmire, if I recall correctly. That's the actual technical term. It's a quagmire. So anyway, it's an attraction in West Virginia, in the middle of a big wilderness area and a huge forested area. If you look at the East Coast, it's one of those places where it appears that the forest is most dense for the most territory. It looks like, as far as the East Coast goes, it looks like the middle of the forest in a sea of forest. Anyway, so I was interested. I'm talking about, I guess, 2015, 2016, back in that time frame. I think 2016 specifically. I've been investigating that place, the Cranberry Wilderness, and the focal point with the unique wetlands and the rare plants and everything that was called the Cranberry Glades. And there's actually, it's enough of an attraction that there's a parking lot there, relatively large parking lot. And it's kind of like, it's a lot of people zip in there and check out the boardwalk path, which is really interesting. It's only like less than a quarter mile path, right? So it doesn't take very long. So it gets a lot of visitation and a lot of turnover, and all of that. In spite of all of that, it's relatively remote, or as remote as you could ask for on the East Coast, or the Mid-Atlantic anyway. Mm-hmm. So I was checking the place out, and I was really in the mode of trying to think like the Sasquatch, or where are they going to be? And so I was basically looking for parking lots, relatively busy parking lots that were next to forested areas. And this one is not just next to, but it's surrounded by forests. So anyway, so I got there and looked around at a bunch of things, and there was actually, when I first got there, there was a new trying to remember if it was complete the first time I got there. There was a new bathroom. The place gets enough visitation that they built a bricks and mortar bathroom for like, and it was like, well, you can imagine how big the place was. It wasn't huge, but it was, it gets enough visitation that they found it worthwhile to actually build a bricks and mortar bathroom with accommodations for, a small crowd. Whereas before it had been just like an outhouse kind of thing. And that I think is actually relevant to the situation. So anyway, I think I was looking for the guy there who was just interested in the activity going on in the parking lot, and where would that guy be hanging out. And so I went there and just went opposite the boardwalk. Where that boardwalk begins is on one side of the road and one side of the parking lot. And there's, in the summer, the weather's nice, there's steady traffic on that little boardwalk. But across the street from there, across the road from there, there is no marked trail. And it's actually pretty thick vegetation. That area, I think, is designated wilderness. I think their management there is that they don't really do anything to cut or remove any dead timber. So anyway, so it's pretty dense, and there's a lot of dead timber on the ground already. So I was like, where am I going to go? I'm going to go where the people don't usually go. And so and there was a little game trail there, and that's where the outhouse used to be. Like, you could tell when I first got there that they had just torn down the outhouses because there was fresh straw. They just had construction equipment in there just very recently. And there was straw down to try to control erosion and stuff. So they'd torn down the outhouse, which was on the far side of the parking lot, and they actually built a bricks and mortar thing, a much more substantial actual bathroom. But I think there was so anyway, I went to where the outhouse used to be, basically, and I continued into the forest that way where there is no marked trail, and I was just following a little game trail that was fairly obvious at the beginning, and then very quickly it gets kind of faint. But I didn't get very far. This was like a really calm day in September. Very, very light wind, if any wind at all. And anyway, so I took a few steps back following this game trail, and this series of sounds started happening. First, it sounded like gunshots, almost like a series of really loud, sharp bang, 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 bang. And then that kind of turned into the slow kind of, the sound of brakes and pops, and what it sounds like when a gigantic tree is slowly falling over, because that's exactly what happened. And so after several seconds elapsed, the thing hit the ground, and it was extremely loud, thunderous. And I was amazed that I couldn't see it, but I was like, right where I was, there was a rise just in front of me. And it was, densely forested and lots of underbrush, and there was no marked trail back there at all. So I couldn't see very far ahead at all. I was trying to look up above I was trying to look at the treetops to see if I could tell what had happened, and I really couldn't see it, but I just stopped right where I was. And because this was really loud. And I was upset with myself that I didn't have a recorder running, or a video, better yet, taking video with my camera. but of course I didn't. So I missed the whole huge tree fall, which was like exceptionally loud.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so after that, I stood there for a long time just listening and thinking, and eventually I continued into the woods there, and I looked around and I tried to figure out if I could figure out which tree had fallen, and that was going to be iffy. I could take a long time looking at all the fallen trees back there, without necessarily even coming to any determination about which one was that one. So I didn't give that project a lot of time, but I did go exploring back that direction. And there's a stream bed back there, and it looked like there was a path through the vegetation, the low herbaceous vegetation, and I followed that for a little ways, but I didn't see anything except like really interesting scenery, really interesting spot back there. So I looked around, and eventually headed on home. But of course, I went back to that spot several times in the, I think I went back once and looked around that same place, and it was uneventful. And I think it was the second return trip, parked in the same parking area. This time I was careful, to have my recorder running when I entered the same place that I had before, looked around, scrounged around, went up the hillside there, because there is some higher ground up there where you could actually kind of observe people coming and going. So I explored all around, gave it a leisurely kind of exploration, and then didn't record anything of note. Went back to the truck, and I think I went on a different. I actually hiked on one of the marked trails nearby for a while and came back, and then anyway, I made one more kind of exploration trip in the same general area, except I went down just a few yards along the road, actually toward the entrance. So I basically entered in the same place, but went, I guess it's downstream. There's actually, there's two different creek beds right there. Anyway, that's not important. So it was like 20 to 40 yards down from down the road from where the first tree fall episode happened. And there's a big rhododendron thicket, and I looked all around through there and scrounged around and had my recorder going and everything. And after I got tired of doing that, I gave up, and I came out of the woods to the roadbed and walked on up to the parking lot, not very far at all. And was getting ready to pack it in and head back home. And there was like a handful of other people there in the parking lot. And suddenly there was the sound of another big tree falling. And everybody in the parking lot heard it. They all looked over in this exactly where I had just come from. So that to me, and I'm stupid. I didn't have the recorder going at that point anymore, and I didn't even think to interview any of the people that were there at that point, because I just grabbed my camera and I went back over there thinking I was going to, see something that I didn't see before. But anyway, so that didn't produce anything, and it would have been better for me just to stay there and talk to the other people. But so that's the with the second tree fall thing, that to me was a relatively strong confirmation. Of course, it's not proof of anything that it was, and I didn't see what pushed over either of those trees, but it was a very calm day, both incidents were on calm days. So that's, I think of that as like the one possible.
It was the thing that got you even more interested in figuring out what's out there, and
it was like making contact in a way that I hadn't been able to before. I felt like I'd made contact with a real thing, and that definitely it made me more eager for additional contact.
Right.
And I felt like it was fairly strong confirmation there. I felt like I was, because the one could be any kind of fluke occurrence, just the one.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was right. That was just after I had, late that same summer, I had gone on my first, and was still my first and only BFRO expedition, which was led by Chris Noel. In New York. I was a big, Leon, I gotta confess here, I was a big Chris Noel head at that point, and I was into Utah Sasquatch. I was on the Utah Sasquatch train. Okay.
Oh yeah.
On that train. And I'm not sure, I don't know that I'm off of that train yet, man. Just to warn you, I'm on that. I think I'm still on that train. I'm not on the Chris Noel train because he blocked me like a year ago now.
yeah, totally. Yeah. Don't ask him too many good questions, or else he'll delete you after he tries to slam you first. About your grammar or spelling.
But I mean, and I hate to mention names like that, but it helps to explain where I'm coming from, because that was like Chris Noel was like the core of my initial online Bigfoot situation. I don't know whether to call it the online Bigfoot community, such as it is, which it may not be as much of a community as that would imply.
Well, we've all had that moment. We've all had those initial times, because we go through these stages, and where we have beliefs, right, and we want to really believe in it and see this stuff and say that it's so great. And you believe in the Bigfoot tree. Some people believe in a Bigfoot tree. I think I saw.
Well, it's hard too, because I mean, honestly, if you're an honest person, you're thinking that other people are going to be honest. How are you going to tell until you spend more time with them? Then you realize there's something wrong, right, or you kind of get your spidey senses going, and then like I know Rio quite well and all that kind of stuff. And so, right, and I study systems, so I was curious about the system. But in order to study the system, you got to drink the Kool-Aid of the system, so you can figure out, what the beliefs are and how it grabs hold of the person internally to take you on these trips that later on you start posing the right questions. Open systems are about the right questions, but a closed system doesn't like people that have an open system mentality, because they feel very threatened. And the agenda isn't the topic; the agenda is their agenda, and that's why they're threatened. So, I mean, I don't care about being wrong. I just want to know what the hell's going on. You know what I mean? I'll bow my knee, trust me. But
at some point, maybe not tonight, or maybe tonight is good. I don't know. But at some point, we need to get more granular about this discussion about. So how much of, in other words, there's some. Let me just say that the Utah Sasquatch methodology has come under some suspicion and skeptical reevaluation, but I don't know how what the extent of that is, or even the particulars
we'll
of
go
it.
Into the.
Because I've heard people refer to this, but I haven't heard the story, or I haven't heard I've looked around, but I haven't heard the meat of that story. And I don't know if
dark. That's what happens, unfortunately, is when something happens and it goes dark, you can't get any information. But you can talk to people like me who were in it, in the private group, in the inner circle, is what they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate to be in the IC, because Chris Noel let me into the IC because I was bothering him so much about, I was like, Impossible Visits would really be better if it had an editorial board, You know, I'm willing to be on the editorial board of Impossible Visits if you think that's something you could do. And he was not into that. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I just wanted some way to broaden. I wanted to broaden it beyond like an autocracy. Because that was because he was like the only real person I'd met from the Bigfoot community, and that only by virtue of that one one weekend BFRO expedition thing, which actually was a really fun experience, and I got on really well with Chris, and I was and when the tree fall thing happened, I had to tell Chris about it right away. That was like I was at that point with Chris, you know. Kind of irritating, I'm sure it was. And
well, now, you know, tree falls and those type of encounters, are they encounters?
Right.
Or is it nature? We're very critical thinking, right? That it could just be nature. It could be just wet old logs falling.
Could be entropy, plain and simple entropy. Right. And it could always be the flying spaghetti monster who, you know, if I understand it correctly, the flying spaghetti monster is fond of confusing scientific thinking by it messes with the data. It reaches in with its noodly appendage, they say. It reaches in with the noodly appendage and it messes up the data, and nobody else knows about that, right? And it's like, you know, it's keeping people in the dark ages. But goodness. I mean that you gotta allow for that.
Well, we'll let that spaghetti monster go now and move on with the show and get on with this Relict Hominoid Inquiry. I don't know about everybody else, but I didn't really know what that was. I thought it was just one paper written and Dr. Meldrum was involved, and that's all that was, until, you know, Kevin and I have been talking or communicating through email for a while, even before he went on Cole's show, but I didn't know how I wanted to approach the topic. Okay. Because I didn't want to go all head into a very hard topic for people to understand. You've got this whole different lingo that you talk.
Right.
That, you know, can go in here and right out the other end, and it doesn't really stick because I can't think that way. I'm not that scientifical. Okay. I just want to know the means to the end. I want to know why it's important and that type of information. And this inquiry here, its objective was to promote research and to provide a venue that you said citizen scientists could do research or essays or commentate on the issue about Relict Hominoid. And
the citizen science thing is a relatively new point of focus, and I'm not even sure how. That's a new thing that is going on now, I assume. But it's going to be interesting to watch and see what that produces, because as we all know, there's a lot of people out there that really know a lot about what's going on, who don't actually have PhDs, and that doesn't invalidate their knowledge. But honestly, I don't know. I don't have any inside information about that. I just know that it's a new point of emphasis, which is really interesting. And I hope we should, somebody should be submitting more stuff there.
My dog is going apeshit over there. Sorry. So I didn't know there's a lot of information on there. Okay. And I believe I did put it down into the description where you can find the Relict Hominoid Inquiry and the different sections. But when you went in, there was the research article from Dr. Haskell Hart. I did attempt to try to get him on tonight, but we weren't able to do that. So his paper is there, and you used, in fact, that helped you in your essay. You
Yep.
know.
So yeah, so I was talking about. I was teaching that literature class at the time when the first Ketchum study, when they did the press conference, releasing whatever they had at that point, and I talked about it in class, and because I already had it sort of tied in with some of the other readings that we were talking about. So I remember talking about it in class, but also being really confused about what the human hybrid thing meant. And how that seemed to be introducing more, to me, it seemed to be introducing more confusion than solving anything. And so I spent ever since it first came out, I was trying to figure out what's the basic misinterpretation that's going on here. And of course, there's a lot of animosity that has built up out of frustration since that essay was first became available in 2013, and I really underestimated the extent of that. There's a lot of frustration built up around this thing because, as you both know, and as most of the listeners know, I'm sure, the scientific world at large did not receive the study well, and they actually, I won't get into the self-publication thing.
Yeah, I've got that a little bit coming up too, but
so
everybody, there was people trying to determine the procedures she used. They questioned the validity of the samples, her techniques. All kinds of things were brought up, and Dr. Hart was one of those, and even did this book, The Failed DNA Study, and brought to light a lot of that stuff.
And actually made the study that was the original paper was difficult to get the whole story out of. And when this book first came out, that's a 2020 publication. I was already working on this essay, and I was unsure about how well this was going to go, and then when I first saw this cover, I was like, oh, I misinterpreted the cover, and I thought he was implying that they had found evidence which actually somehow invalidated Sasquatch, or somehow was disconfirming of Sasquatch. So anyway, when that first came out, I ordered a copy of it, and then I think that same day I emailed Dr. Meldrum because there's right forward by Dr. Meldrum there, so I knew he was well aware of this and everything in it, and I basically just asked him, does it make sense for me to keep on working on this, or is this whole study completely invalidated? And he wrote back right away and was encouraging. That was the first contact I'd made with him about that project, and then we, I guess, corresponded, very sparsely and sporadically for about 18 months until the end of 2021 when it actually became available. So it's my essay is a 2021 publication, but it came out right at the very end of the year. Like, actually was first available in January of 2022.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, I was, but I should also add that, forgive me, trying to maintain coherence here. This book by Dr. Hart, as I was saying,
I'm trying to keep him in the show itinerary.
Thank you.
He likes to talk,
In the
about
lane. You're
things.
trying to keep him
That's
on
all.
the lane
So
there.
we're gonna keep moving. We'll keep moving. Let me help you out here.
So
Now, the one thing is, I had questions. I had questions for Kevin, and I had questions in regards to the whole Ketchum deal and the Genome Project and the new thing coming up. So that was hence where I wanted to take, this show and bring forth some of that misinformation that's out there, and to have that main question: how do we find the path to explain Sasquatch as a natural flesh and blood species? Okay. But to do that, I realized that I really had to explain two different things here, because we've got a community that kind of separates themselves into two main groups. And you have your creationists and your evolutionists, and we're not going to talk about, it's not that science part is what we want to go for when we're talking about this DNA study, and how some of the things that Ketchum says, she is going opposite her the science view. Okay.
I wrote the essay, and it covered way too much territory in just one essay, because I was trying to explain why the Ketchum human hybrid idea is wrong, and also a better hypothesis to replace it. And maybe I should have written those two things separately. But anyway, the human hybrid thing is just it's driving me crazy the more I hear that phrase, because it's completely at odds with the usual process of speciation, or in other words, the formation of a new species. That usually does not happen through hybridizing. That's just the fact about how evolution works and how species work. So that was like, I guess the main. So there's a certain amount of it's bewildering, because with the new study, Dr. Ketchum is insisting that they are doing scientifically valid work, and that their science is not being rebutted. Like makes it sound like the science is all on the level, and but it's being suppressed. Essentially, it's being suppressed. And I'm not sure if that suppression is because it is contrary to evolutionary theory, but there is that suggestion, at least in the World Bigfoot Radio interview, or one of those recent interviews. There's the suggestion that why is the government suppressing all of this? And I guess it's because as she says, the human hybrid theory is contrary to evolutionary theory. She does mention that in one of the interviews, and I do agree with that. It is contrary to evolutionary theory. There's actually a much simpler explanation that is consistent with evolutionary theory. And so that's no
conspiracy. It's just that she would be incorrect with her
right, exactly,
definition.
Yes, exactly. Should I want me to continue rambling, or should we?
You do. Go ahead.
Do you want me to play one of those snippets?
Oh yes, please.
Audio.
Yeah. So this is from World Bigfoot Radio, part 2.
Yes, this is from part 2.
It's unique. It's not anything that's been seen before, and this is what's interesting about it, and the fact that they're part human, that they're a hybrid. That's interesting too.
Yeah, I certainly agree that it's interesting, and it is certainly an issue that requires to be explained, and that's what I'm suggesting, is there's an alternate way of interpreting this data that should be more acceptable to science, because it's already recognized as happening with many other species and many other forms of life. Almost, well, I shouldn't say, I'm not going to make any broad statements, but most forms of life that reproduce sexually have the potential for this thing to occur. This thing being mitochondrial introgression is what it's called, and it's really just a way that the mitochondrial genome spreads apart from how it can spread from one species to another without really anybody even trying, or without any special circumstances. It's actually, depending on who you ask, the experts that I read for this essay suggest that mitochondrial introgression is the most likely result when two closely related species come into contact under the invasive species kind of scenario, where in other words, there's a very small amount of hybridizing that actually occurs, and the hybridizing tends to be in just one direction, meaning from the established species into the colonizer or into the invasive species. So that's the weird thing, is that it fits a pattern that results from invasive species, but it affects the invasive species and not the established one. So it's kind of reverse of what you might expect from the invasive label. The most likely result, if you have two species like this inhabiting the same territory, it's quite likely that their mitochondria would be very similar or even indistinguishable if this process has been ongoing. And so that's what the essay is trying to explain, how this how there's a very mainstream biological explanation for this combination of human mitochondria or human mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA, which is something else, something without precedent, something that we don't really have anything to compare it to. That basic scenario, which is part of what, which is really the main thing that Ketchum is talking about with the claims of the human hybrid idea, and the idea that it's descended from humans, and the idea that it's recent, it's a new thing. All of that is, I'm suggesting that each of those claims is unsupported, or there's not sufficient information to make those claims. It would be much more likely that that this hybridizing had occurred, and that the mitochondrial changes have been ongoing in the population. But it's much more likely that it was a separate species beforehand, and it remains the same species that it was before the hybridizing today. That's the much more likely, more mainstream evolutionary theory kind of explanation. The hybridizing thing is just it seems so obvious, but at the same time, it's kind of confusing, because the hybrids themselves. So the hybrid, we're defining hybrid as the offspring of a mating pair consisting of two separate species, right? Mother representing one species and father representing a different species. Now they have to be closely related. There's no way it could occur at all if they were not already closely related. So the most likely result when that happens, which is not that unusual in nature, the most likely result when that happens for certain kinds of species is the spread of the mitochondrial genome from one to the other, and really no other lasting consequences of it. No other, nothing else that you could look for to demonstrate that it happened. So all I'm really trying to say is that there's a perfectly acceptable and I start to say known, but they don't really perfectly understand how this process works. But it is very amply documented in many different sexually reproducing species. That was a mistake that I wanted to mention from. I mistakenly said in the earlier appearance on Squatch D TV, I said multicellular life, and really I should have said sexually reproducing life forms.
So also just out of curiosity, Kevin, is if you have two species that are like, if you got to cross a mule between a mule and a horse, you get a donkey and a horse, you get a mule, right? But the capacity for it to reproduce itself is almost zero, isn't it?
Yes, or there's usually some barrier to reproduction for the hybrid individuals. Yeah. So the hybrid individual is really not representative of either species. And I'm suggesting it would be more accurate to think of it as an anomaly, just an exceptional generation. But those effects would be localized and temporary. They would affect a small number of individuals for a limited number of generations, and then there would be no lasting effect on the population, except for the mitochondrial DNA change, because that is inherited 100%. So that's the other thing that seems so mysterious is just by with very, very limited actual hybridizing between humans and Sasquatch, there could, or with very limited hybridizing, the effects of gene flow, horizontal gene flow from the one species to the other, that's generally very limited hybridizing is sufficient for those effects to compound over generations. So this process can begin and take place over tens of thousands of years. And if you're not paying attention, it could come as quite a shock that the mitochondrial genome has changed, and it no longer indicates a separate species. Now it seems to be human, and then and that was part of the problem with the whistleblower thing. Whatever it is it a human thing, or is it something other than human? And I don't know why that would make the difference in their deliberations, but
as she says, I mean, it comes out of her own mouth. Let me see if I can play this one.
That I'll release some of that information along with the new study. And they had done some DNA, and it corroborated mine. And they had like 13 bodies in a live capture, and it was very interesting. I've got data that's been given to me from them before they died, and so I'm not.
Wow.
13 bodies, a live capture,
and a live capture. That's just stunning.
She talking about she had the live study of a Sasquatch, and also they caught a Sasquatch. Is that what she said?
13 I guess 13 deceased bodies and one live one.
Must have a lot of film on it, I would think. You would think
I
you'd take
hope
lots
so.
of pictures.
Lord, I hope so.
The weird thing, my angle's a little different than yours. Is I listened to her narration and how she sets the receiver of her information, verbal, auditorial stuff. So she says, it's interesting to me. If you use the phrase interesting to me, your brain can't help but go open. Why is that interesting to her? And then she fills in why it is. And now it's in your head, but you don't know what she's talking about. I don't know what I'm not a geneticist. I said I'm definitely out of my wheelhouse, But the problem is you come on board on the Bigfoot thing. Again, this is where that trusting, if you're curious about something, you go online and you investigate things. And then there was a word today. I won't remember it right now, of course, but there's another stage there I think that people miss out, and that is when you're curious about something, the next thing is you start listening to people. Problem is, are they value what they're saying is true? And when she's using terminology like that, it's bothersome to me, because when I listen to you, Kevin, or if I listen to Steve from Curious Cryptid and stuff like that, or JC, I can pretty much trust how you're talking because you're not using that type of sentence structure, I guess, the way she's using it. She's using it to try to give you a word salad approach to confirm or confirm her positioning, and that's just not, that's happening way too much out in the community. It's getting better, don't get me wrong, but
this the human, especially the human hybrid idea, has kind of, I guess, taken off even among folks who may or may not align themselves with Dr. Ketchum. Well, and Chris Noel, of course, has to sort some stuff out now because so I saw a recent interview with him just from 2 weeks ago, and he started to say he started explaining this whole thing about the discordance, and he says Dr. Ketchum thinks that it's, well, I don't know what she thinks, is basically what he said. He stopped himself and just said, I don't know what she thinks, but I think that it was a primate. And so my point is that if it was a primate, there's no reason to say that it's a brand new thing happening right then for the first time like this. So the hybridizing thing must have taken place, but it's probably being overstated, overhyped to the maximum extent possible with this human hybrid concept. It's probably, it's because that would, if indeed there were a human hybrid species, that would require a lot of work, just arranging to produce hybrid specimens and bringing them together, because that's the one main thing that one reason why hybridity doesn't usually produce new species is because there are not enough mates available, because hybridizing is an unusual thing. There's usually a reason that it happened in the first place. It does occur in nature, but it's not the usual thing, and it doesn't ordinarily produce a new species. Usually, in one way or another, it leads to enlargement of the one species or the other involved. So in other words, it's whatever the hybrid representatives are, they're absorbed into one or the other of the parent populations. And so there's a separate group, a reproductively isolated group doesn't ever form, because there's never enough hybrids in the same place at once. Or at least that's the main barrier against speciation through hybridizing.
I think Kevin meant hybridization. He says the scientist studies are shown whole populations diminishing from. Oh, I think he meant hybridization.
Might have been an autocorrect thing.
Yeah, not hibernation.
Hybridizing. Yeah, whole populations. I'm not sure what populations there, because
I don't know what either.
Data is scarce for the forest people. But that does happen. I mean, genetic diversity, it can be lost through hybridizing. That's one frequent outcome, actually, of hybridizing is a loss of genetic diversity. Where, in other words, groups that had been separate, there's gene flow established between groups that had been separate, and that gene flow tends to erase the differences that had accumulated. And so they like that. I think that's the situation with the red wolf. I think that, I don't think all the red wolves die. They just get taken over by other non-red wolf or allied populations. So they're bred out of existence rather than all dying. And it's not the sort of extinction where they're all killed by something or other. They just get absorbed into a different population.
And remember, she's trying to prove the existence of not just Bigfoot. Okay.
Yeah, that's where it gets really weird.
Of her. Okay, now I have to go back on my other.
That's where it's really hard for me to understand how.
Right. We are talking about her Sasquatch Genome Project from 2013 is changed to Cryptid Genome Project. She has made her goal, okay, for her first a GoFundMe, which she was asking for $20,000 to start her project, okay, and it was to look for dogman and giants and mermaids, okay, and she already has things. She already has it. The only one she says she doesn't have is a mermaid and a Kandahar giant. Those are the two she's looking for right now. And let me play a little something.
That's yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because I don't have that many, but I would love to have, the different races of giants represented. We've got two, but they're going to be the same race. I would love to have the.
What are they? The Anakim, the conehead guys?
Oh, I've got those too, but that's different.
Okay.
They're not really giants. There are some giant ones, but what I've got is regular people-sized ones.
Just people-sized giants.
No, I'm talking about like the Lovelock Cave giants. I've got two of those kind of samples, but I would like to have something like the Kandahar giant, bigger than these.
I know some.
She already has them. She already knows that's what she has.
She's got that's the weird thing about how you can kind of understand how it would work with samples that are all thought to be Sasquatch, which is, interbreeding, hybridizing between our species and Sasquatch is a lot less, is more plausible than any other of the species in question here. Like, so the dogman thing, I think everybody is coming to the understanding that if you're talking about dogman for real, you're talking about something supernatural, because there's no evolution just doesn't work that way, and and biology just doesn't work that way. You're not going to have a hybrid product of humans and dogs. It's not going to happen. Or if it does, it's something supernatural like Anubis. And actually she does mention Anubis in that interview.
She also mentions mermaids, and here's that little clip.
Where we can maybe do some individual genes and maybe some different cryptids if we can get the samples. Like I said earlier, a mermaid's on my bucket list. And, there's other things too, like goat men and other things. We would love to have different cryptid DNA. And because my theory, once again, is that they're all going to have human mothers. I believe it. And I want to prove it. I've already gotten human DNA from the dogman mitochondrial samples, both of them. So I know that they have human mothers.
No, Bigfoot.
So, I don't know how they're
talking about. Like, what is she talking about?
She already has proof that they have
already.
mothers.
I don't know how she has identified the dogman samples.
Yeah.
Like, there must be. Hopefully she's doing. The full procedure of describing it, examining it microscopically and describing it in great detail anatomically before you destroy that to get the DNA out of it. Hopefully she's going through all of that, because that first part is the whole. I mean, that's the whole advantage that offered by hair, as opposed to other kinds of samples that don't preserve some morphology that you can analyze. But
she also states that about the hair, even though it doesn't have a medulla, they're not finding the DNA in it. They're finding it only in the end.
On the follicles are skin tags, tags on the exterior of the follicle, I believe. Let me see. The best samples are hair samples, which have the follicle intact and roots, ideally, because she's very adamant about this, that they could not recover DNA from within the hair shaft, even though there was a medulla present, that medulla did not produce DNA.
Correct. And let me see. I think this is it. Let me see. I'm not sure.
Fighting over whether it was homo or not, if it was true homo, and because they tried to make it fit an evolutionary model, and a hybrid doesn't fit an evolutionary model.
Right.
And that's where the big debate came in. So they never came out with it, but I think also the government suppressed that too, because it was a secret study. And but there's no way it wasn't real, because he had data that I didn't have, and I had data he didn't have, and between the two of us, it's really interesting.
Wow, man.
Secret studies. Yeah, she's in the inner circle for those studies.
The other inner circle. Yeah.
Whistleblowers lead exciting lives, I guess.
Now remember, she had already had all this misconduct stuff during this time in 2021, and all that was covered by Culls on his show Squatch DTV, which you guys need to be subscribed to, please. And Dr. Ketchum was accused of by the Harris County Public Defender's Office of professional misconduct. Now, I believe she has gotten her rating reinstated. I don't know. Kevin was.
I think that's correct. Yes, I'm just passing that along from Michael Merchant's brief video short.
Oh, his 2-minute with thing.
Yeah, one of those. Oh no, I'm sorry. It wasn't one of the shorts. It was Squatch Talk podcast.
Oh, okay.
Is where I'm getting that info from.
Okay.
Hopefully if she's still practicing. Now, I was under the impression though that she was not really practicing as a geneticist any longer.
Right. Those findings, from the court, I've got a link in the description if you want to go look at that, because it's not just that, there's more stuff there. So you can go, and it's all public, and look at it for yourself. And very interesting. Anyway,
so the confusing thing to me is she unaware of the conflicts, or is she aware of it and just trying to craft a theory around it, which now I guess relies on a government conspiracy. It sounds like a conspiracy between mainstream science and the government, because nobody wants this thing to be real. Think of the liability.
She's made many statements in regards to everybody supports me. They just don't want to be a part of it. They don't want their name mentioned. But behind the scenes, everybody's agreed with me and supports me. And she does have support, because that's evident by the $2,000,
and
goals to meet.
And I can sympathize with her supporters because it should be the science of DNA should be able to explain something about this Sasquatch mystery. I mean, it really should offer something. And so far, it sounds like it. I mean, from the way that the results have been explained, which is very little. There's very little explanation about how results are interpreted, and that's the whole problem in this case. I think is the human hybrid interpretation. So the fact that there's human mitochondrial DNA there takes all the attention away from everything else, and there has to be some explanation of how did that happen, and it must be a hybrid. And I mean, the logic does demand that there was hybridization at some point, but you can't say at when that occurred, and you can't say how often that occurred. You just know that it happened at least once for that lineage. And so, in other words, there had to be the species in question had to be pre-existing. And that you would expect that one to continue rather than something totally new to originate right then, because of this hybridizing with human women. I mean, it's a remarkable piece of information, but it's actually not that important to understanding what Sasquatch actually is. If there's any truth to the emerging pattern, if in fact this is an emerging pattern of mitonuclear discordance in Sasquatch DNA, that is, if Sasquatch DNA is generally human mitochondrial DNA and representing strictly human mitochondrial DNA and nuclear material from some other species that doesn't match anything on record, that general picture, that seems to be the general picture from the Ketchum study, but there were a lot of problems with that, right? And especially with the nuclear results. I think Dr. Hart pretty well explained that the nuclear results are in error. Actually, it was, before Dr. Hart's book came out, I really didn't feel like I had an adequate understanding of the Ketchum study. So at first I was worried that his book kind of made my essay unnecessary, but it actually turned out to be a really helpful. It ended up making the essay much longer, but it was very helpful for me to. I didn't have an adequate understanding of the Ketchum study before Dr. Hart's book came out.
Well, I think that's the frustrating part about it when that evidence. But I mean, first of all, everyone's excited because she's a doctor, right? But it's not her field. It's not in a wheelhouse, even though she tried to paint it that way in her verbiage that she would say.
Right.
And it's a letdown when it happens. And it's the same thing. Like, I mean, most of us don't know how genes work. We don't understand all these 25-cent words you're dropping left hand, whereas you're like, oh yeah, I know what that talks about. The rest of us are just stuck here trying to figure out, trusting. And I think that's the thing is, and it is amazing, you come up with a great idea, let's use DNA, and then you've got 5 people who will use the idea for financial gain or significant perception of themselves. Look what I can do. And it always gets frustrating because, going through dump trucks of data all the time, and then you're looking for the real important morsels, it gets so colored that, again, a professional community, which I don't agree with that narration out that, that science is against all science. If you prove, and you're in science, whatever field you're in, and you prove some other science theory wrong, you're a superstar. Like you're not a, oh my God, I can't believe so-and-so did that to Albert Einstein,
but you would have questioned. In order to become a superstar, though, you would have to be adequately positioned in the relevant part of academia, and she is.
Oh, totally right.
she's really not in academia. She's in the well, that's really the whole problem, is that her perspective is too narrow.
Wasn't she
wheelhouse
just
too,
she
that
was
happens
doing
too much
dog?
in these kind of
She was doing
was that Nikki?
dog. Wasn't she doing dog DNA prior to that?
And horse and horses
veterinary.
and so yeah, it's her veterinary. Nothing wrong at all with being a doctor of veterinary medicine, but it doesn't have the breadth that a PhD does, which is exactly what the problem is. Like, and actually, all of the co-authors are either microbiologists or molecular biologists. There's nobody with a broad perspective among any of the listed authors. So that, I think that's the main, or on top of all the other problems, I think that was like the basic main fundamental one.
Yeah.
Is that they were,
that's kind of interesting, Kevin, that you say that, because I talked to her a couple of years ago. I said, would you be interested in getting on a panel with other DNA experts? And she said, well, only if they're DNA experts. And I'm thinking, well, the ones you've provided, that's not their field. That's not their wheelhouse. You know what I'm saying? And again, I'm pretty sure it's, again, they always say yes, right to the bitter end, until you get the people. I say, okay, I got these 5 people. Here's their credentials. Here, you can check them all out. They're way more academically trained than you are, credentialed than you would be. You think she'd get on that panel? Not a chance. It's not a chance. Because she's controlling the narration, which is good if you're trying to get people to buy what you're selling. But you try to sell it to somebody who knows the narration, and they realize, you're not selling me this lemon of a car. Thank you very much. This idea that's not a healthy idea, and it doesn't help. It's just more time it's wasted that we have to move or get all that out of the way, keep defending the position or going against that position, so people can move forward in this field, instead of let's just find out if it's a Sasquatch or not. Let's find them out. We think we know people who've seen them, so let's go find out if they're there. Well, no, let's talk about the idea, the ideas.
But
sorry, Nikki.
I think that is one thing that has been. Leon, you did a video essay called what was it called? What are we missing, or something like that? It was one of your but it was like 3-4 years ago now already. But one of your videos was about what are we missing? Trying to think outside the box, or trying to figure out. Trying to figure out where the limits of the box are to begin with, and then trying to think beyond those. Mr. Wizard Adirondacks, I think that it's very likely that they do indeed have subspecies. And I mean, that just makes sense to me, because that's actually the ordinary way that species develop, and it takes a long time. Eventually, if those subspecies, if they are separated from one another consistently enough for a long enough time, eventually they become separate species. But their subspecies, as long as they're able to interbreed, generally they would be considered part of the same species. I remember Sasquatch Wizard Adirondacks had a question in the earlier podcast about the feet, and how, and this is actually a point in Chris Noel's bogus video about hybridizing. So the feet are, it's noteworthy how similar the suspected Sasquatch foot and the normal Homo sapiens foot. They're very similar, or certainly more similar than our foot is to any of the extant apes. And that, that's certainly a noteworthy thing that would guide our hypotheses. However, a complex feature like that would need to be reinforced for a long period of time. And so, in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that instead of being the result of hybridizing, which is like a temporary, localized, short-term interruption, the similarities in our feet are much more likely to be the result of our common descent. So in other words, it means that we were both part of the same group. We were both part of the same species way back when, and the changes in the features that separate our feet have accumulated since that time. That would be the I'm pretty sure that would be the orthodox kind of evolutionary explanation there. Our feet are similar because we are closely related. We're descended from the same group, but those similarities don't come about through hybridizing, right? Hybridizing does not produce that kind of a complex, ongoing, lasting similarity. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Please, somebody else say something now.
Okay. You were on a roll. I couldn't stop you that time.
What to learn.
So, we're just trying to iterate that there's a lot of claims being made, okay? And that they're being set as facts. And there still could be many things that need to be taken a look at the way they're being done. And there's evidence of that, okay? The things that I had posted here, okay? These are facts. These are things that have really happened, okay? Not only that, her buying the De Novo journal and to post her own review, okay? Now,
it's a shame that journal hasn't had additional issues. I was looking forward to reading more stuff in that journal, and I couldn't find much more stuff.
There wasn't anything. So if you
except
go
for her own studies, the only thing on there is her own. Her own.
Yeah, it's her own, and then she has it listed like first round, second round. Like it kept getting rejected, and then she has one saying passing peer reviews. Okay, and when you click on that, it comes up with the author's responses. Okay. And I got to read this to you because she's passing this off as a past peer review. And it says, this is clearly important information that I hope the public will have access to soon. However, I was immediately taken by surprise after thoroughly reading the manuscript to see such a high reference to hominins, including the title. I was surprised because there is no substantial evidence presented by the author that the species identified in the 3-whole genome is a biped. Eyewitness accounts are the only data presented to determine or substantiate a biped of any kind. It would be much more appropriate to delineate in this manuscript that the novel genomic evidence highly suggests an unknown species living contemporaneously in continental and subarctic U.S. and Canada within the order of primate. And there is more. I mean, it goes on and on about things that they did not agree with.
And it was especially on the big picture end of things, like the interpretation of the data. They had questions about the data, but actually, the initial submission didn't include much of the raw data at all. It may not have included any of the raw data. So the questions from the mainstream science was mostly about the big picture and how this fits into the larger picture. And that, in other words, the angels. I'm sorry, what was that?
We didn't even touch on the fallen angels or the whole tree of life.
Yes, the tree of
aspect.
life. Are we approaching the end of our time
No,
together?
let's go another 5-10 minutes on and just this end, because this is crazy how she's going back and forth, you know, about non-human Sasquatch progenitors were the fallen angels of Genesis.
She knows nothing about like that type of thinking. It usually goes along religious systems that are very fundamental, so they're very in-house, and that's what I've heard this hundreds of times. Angels are sexless. They're sexless. Angels are sexless. How are they going to have sex with a beautiful man's daughters? I mean, there's just so much wrong with this whole idea of, and this is that apophenia of that scientifical approach, whereas the idea is up here in our mind, which is good. This is how you figure things out, because you don't know. So you have ideas, but you don't start putting the ideas down until they become solid on the topic. You just don't whip it all together, you know. Maybe it was kangaroos. They interbred with kangaroos. Maybe raccoons, because raccoons' footprints sure look a lot like human footprints, baby footprints. You know, like, oh my God, there must be a baby Sasquatch in my horse stable, you know, roaming around at nighttime. I don't know, like, and that's, I mean, I don't know. Well, I do know, and I don't blame viewers. I don't blame people coming into the YouTube stuff, because again, Kevin, like you and I and Brent are started off in those same groups like we were talking about, and we're pretty smart people, but we're trusting too. And you come from a thing where you work with people who are trusting, and they're academics, and you're trying to solve problems and mysteries and understandings of human behavior. If I started trusting them the way I would trust some of these people that have these channels out there, people will be going more crazier, even though they're going crazy now in our society, but even worse. Like and I don't understand. Like I understand what keeps you solid is factual realities. When you know things are facts. When your wife loves you and you know 100% she loves you, you relax. Because you know she can go out with her friends. You're not hyper trying to control her or anything in the environment. You know, you're not a hoarder. You know, I have to keep everything close to me, because if I lose it all, there's something wrong with me. And that's the same idea. This despotism of trying to. I wanted to do a video. I was talking the other day about somebody. I want to have a potato, and then I want to have this. You know how they have the square peg hole, the square hole, the peg hole, the round holes, and you put those things in there. And I wanted to get the potato to fit into a square peg, which it would, of course, a square peg. And then I would keep talking, and I would peel a potato, and I would make mashed potatoes in the whole video, and then I could make it finally fit inside there. And that formulation of dissecting all these things to try to convince us that the porcupine is shape-shifting Sasquatch. Now it's a spiritual Sasquatch. You know, this is Looney Tune. And this is why science is important. Science is not against us. If it is, drive your car into the lake, throw your cell phone out, get rid of your stove, get rid of your lights in your house, get rid of your technical stuff, your computers and stuff. If it's that threatening, if it's that evil, it's not that evil. Science is meant for good purpose. But for every good scientific invention, there's 5 people, if not 100 more, that are going to use it to profit off it. Yep. And they will. And if you talk to any police officer, they're dealing with people that will lie to their face and stay true to their narration to the very end. Okay, you got me, you know, and that's what we're finding online. It's changing, though. And I'm no kidding. Because if you came on roughly when I came on with the same crowd, Kevin, which it sounds like you did, and Brent, I laugh about this all the time, is God, we're so thankful where it's moved to compared to where I started off with, because as someone who studies systems and goes into cults undercover and all this kind of stuff, like it's hard not for me to think that there's some shenanigans and hoodwinks going on, as Brent would say, shenanigans. Nikki says hoodwinking. There's a lot of hoodwinking out here.
Indeed, there is.
And you're upset at me to tell you that there's a lot of shenanigans and hoodwinks out here. Like, if you're being lied to, and we're looking for Sasquatch, that's the topic. We want to find, are these people helping us find them? No, but they're giving us something, obviously, because we're part of this group now. It's a secret circle, the inner circle that we were involved with, and the ideas were good ideas, and there were a lot of people who were in the groups are great people, meaning well.
Yeah.
But the leadership or the main character in the group had alternative motives, unfortunately, but we didn't know that.
Or had already had a lot of prior allegiances and alliances before ever assuming that position, and so everything was influenced by what had already happened. But I had higher hopes that in the interest, I had higher hopes that in the interest of science,
higher hopes.
Yes. In the interest of science, kidding. I thought that, I thought intellectual curiosity would prevail at some point and look for alternate solutions. And that hasn't even happened with the porcupine yet. I mean, I know Chris from the pre-porcupine era. He had already blocked me by the time porcupine fiasco. And, man. So at what point that's where I get hung up, is where does willful ignorance enter hoax territory? When do you because he's very sensitive.
You already know the problem is when you deal with a toxic, sorry Nikki, when you deal with the toxic system, they will try to make you think that you're the crazy one by asking you, because you're asking the right questions that should be asked, because you're going to expose them. You're not trying to expose them, but because they don't have the answers to the right questions, it exposes them. And this is where I think a lot of levity, open systems, about spontaneity, creativity, and levity. Levity is you joke at the ridiculousness of it,
Yes.
But there's a damage to, unfortunately, caused by those type of personalities and those type of people and that behavior that affects people who are good-hearted people. And that's another thing that people should keep in the forefront of their mind is, look, at everything I say is directly connected to my character. So if you want to do, and I know that as somebody who, I deal a lot with some intense stuff, the microscopes can always turn to Leon, and I better have answers. What will you find out about me? Well, it's probably true. Well, I heard him say one time online, blah, blah, blah. You haven't, like, you're online, right? You do 20 videos online or 20 interviews online, and you're not going to get your brain up with your mouse sometimes. It's going to come out a few times. Wrong definition for what I'm trying to say. And
I delivered lectures. I delivered lectures for 22 years or so, and I'm really thankful that few of those were recorded. Maybe very few of those, if any, were recorded. And I can remember specific things that I said, and I just cringe when I think of what I said, and I wish I could take that back, but thank God nobody recorded it.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the other side. It has been recorded, so that's why I had to learn about. I can be a moron. I got a brain injury. I'm recovering. Yeah, that's why it's important to learn. That's why I want to learn. Like with talking to you or from Steve from Curious Cryptid or JC. Or, I am not in threat of anything unless I'm hiding my narration. And that's what we find a lot with the Ketchum study is the hiding of the narration is more relevant than the facts of what she's trying to present. Instead of just getting together and saying, oh, I was wrong. Can you help me with this so in the next study I can be better? Right? Because this is what you're trying to do. I want to be a better person. I don't want to.
Once we get the motto, we can sort of date it. And just like we did with the Sasquatch samples, and they're human especially. And the same sort of with the with if there's any human in the Y chromosome, which it wasn't with the Sasquatch. They were unique. So their progenitor was not male human at all, not even close. It wasn't anything that has been sequenced before. There's a lot of unknown, totally unknown in it. And that's why we're going to revisit even the Sasquatch samples a little bit, because I want to use a different lab and see if we still get the same thing we did with those first 3 genomes. And I bet we will.
Definitely good.
Definitely will. She's already pre-prepped. She knows there's Sasquatch DNA, apparently, even though everyone's telling us it's in their wheelhouse. There's nothing here, but she knows for sure it is. So this is that narration. And if you are bowing down to her because you're hoping, it's kind of like at Christmas time, I hope I get that toy I want for Christmas. And you open up the bag, the parcel, and it's just, it's a sock. Oh, great. Thanks, Granny. And that's the frustrating side of it, is when, when I remember the Ketchum coming out, I thought, okay, there's some rational people out here. There's not very many rational people out here. And that's why it's
surprisingly few,
people.
Well, gentlemen, that was a great conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kevin.
Thank you for tolerating me, and thank you for helping. I appreciate it.
And please stay along while we move along to
show me what you got. Jim, you heard them said, show me what you got. Show me what you got. I want to see what you got. Oh boy.
So we have got that thing that everybody's talking about. Everybody, all the groups.
Oh yeah.
The lovely face of Nefertiti or Nefer, whatever. Nef. Now, this is one picture, okay? It's just one picture, and then he snapped another picture.
Actually, that's two. That's both of them already side by side.
So yeah, and they're side by side, but it's just one mask, okay? It's not 2 masks up there. And in my opinion, it was always a mask. It looks like a mask. It doesn't look human or flesh or anything like that. Okay. And all you had to do was lightening it a little bit. Not even a lot. And you can see the fabric tucked up underneath the thing, and then the fake hairline. I mean, it's not natural. That's not natural. Okay.
And the fabric. Because didn't he say that that was supposed to be the forearm or something?
Yeah, the forearm resting like that. That is not. It is not. Eyes do not deceive, okay? Pictures do tell the truth here. We don't even have to guess. It's fabric. That is not an arm. You can see how when he moved it to the next on the next picture, how it moved. It's not an arm. But I do want to find that mask, and I think we should all try to find that mask. And I spent, a better part of several hours trying to look for the mask, of course. But the one thing you have to realize is that mask has ears, and a lot of the gorilla masks out there don't have ears. So you're able to actually go through them faster, because if it doesn't have an ear, it's not it. There was some close ones, but no ears. And he did state, good luck trying to find the mask. He did say that, by the way.
Okay? Right.
So I went to a lot of my original sources there. Rolloween, I thought it was his because of the way the face is kind of pushed together, but his don't have ears either. So I was like, oh, dang, well, it's not who I thought it was. I went to McAllister Masks. I went all over. I must have hit at least 10 or 15 different sites online that sell Halloween masks, regular masks, create masks, and I have not found it yet. But he does live in Canada, so there may be stuff up there I have not looked at, okay, because I don't know the story there.
I live in Canada, so the thing that immediately when I look at it is the oil content of the skin is that of a flash bulb on a camera or a flash on a camera.
Right. It's just reflecting off the plastic.
The one picture down on the right hand side there you have with the 3. That's a great looking mask. That's a better mask to have used than that one up there that he's done. But yeah,
right. There were so many better options. That's my exact point. Why did he use such a crappy one instead of investing in least? This guy sells that one for like $100 right there. The Rolloween Studios, I think, is $99 to get one of those heads. And
but
I think what he might have done was taken another mask. Sorry, Kevin. I think what he might have done was take another mask, put ears and the hair on it, then painted it again. Because that's why, like, especially, why would you say, like, good luck trying to find the mask, as if people are going to obviously try to find the mask? You know what I mean?
He could have gotten. I did find something
snooping.
super similar, but it again, the hairline was wrong. So maybe he shaved it back, and then you know, which would have altered the way it looked. But then I started looking at the eyes, and I'm like, what can I see inside the eyes? And I kind of could see something in the, you know, the one side, but it wasn't until I thought, well, let me look at the other eye, and you can clearly see the person. Well, I can, because, you know, I was looking at the original. This one's blown up, so it got a little pixelated on me. But somebody's sitting there with the camera, you know, taking the picture like that. Because you have the head and the shoulders, just like, you know, a Sasquatch silhouette. You just have the head and the shoulders smack dab in the middle right there. But I should have put the one previous to this one blow up, because it was a little bit better. But I was in a rush. I had a lot to do. Anyway, remember, there is a lot of information about this guy, okay? He has told lie after lie, and then as soon as he's caught, he changes his story, okay? Because when he put out the eye and said, here's the video proof of, here's a video of the eye, you know, Sasquatch eye. And then somebody says, that's not a Sasquatch eye. It doesn't look like a Sasquatch eye, and people were trying to guess what kind of eye it was. And then Shrum came out and said, that's the fish in the cottage, and went and took pictures of the fish eye, and
that's it.
We had our answer. And then he came back later and he says, oh, it's Neff. She, you know, he was,
she's a card
or whatever was.
Or I'm sorry, he's a kidder.
Yeah, was playing around with me and took a picture because I gave him the camera or whatever.
They're tricksters.
Every time it's a different thing, you know. And Daryl had already confessed anyway. So that,
well, is Daryl, I mean, is Daryl, is his confession like more credible than yeah, I guess.
Well, there are text messages between several people, different people, involving Daryl, whose real name is Dwayne Scott. Okay, he used the alias Daryl.
Okay, right.
Him and his friend, oh my God, was it Sam? I'm going to say Sam. There's another guy involved, and then Mike. So there's all kinds of text messages. Okay, go look at The Truth Prevails on YouTube. He's got a bunch of videos there where he's accumulated everything. And
that does seem like a pretty convincing collection of stuff.
Right.
But it's what confuses me is what is Mike's motivation currently? Like, I guess I don't understand why he's not more wary of being outed and embarrassed, because he must know
he just maintains because he's got a huge following, and I'm sure he's getting the clicks and views because people want to so bad believe in flour, you know. They want to believe in that stuff, so he's gonna always have followers, and you know that's fine. I kind of ignored him for a really long time.
Yeah, and again, too, the thing is, people hunker down. You deal with religions or cults, once you prove evidence of their prophecy of the end of the world is wrong, you'd think it would disband the cult, but it doesn't. They actually hunker down even more. And it's like, again, if you're a police officer, they hunker down because the feedback loop isn't necessarily, it can be a financial one, but it's more from what I've seen, if I'm studying clinical wise, I think what I'm seeing is a deficit in your sense of self. It's more like I don't know how many people even Rick Dyer. I'm never coming on Bigfoot again. Remember him telling us that on your show?
Yeah.
I'm never. What's he doing? He can't help himself.
He can't help himself. Yeah.
I need this slow drip of I'm important. I'm important. I'm important. And if I don't care who listens to me, you can all be crazy. Just make sure you're listening to me. And I think that's my identity is not Sasquatch. You know, my goal is not to prove to the world Sasquatch exists. My goal is to be the best me I can be, because life is pretty awkwardly tough. Find good quality people, try to help them do that. If Sasquatches are side gig, fine, but it's not my sense of identity, my value, my worth, my who I am. And that's the problem when you have your split inside yourself is outside sources give me a sense of something, usually a positive feeling, which is better than my awkward feeling that I usually feel about myself. So I get my shot, my endorphin shot, you could say, because I have a channel and I get to talk to people and I feel important and they're listening to me because no one else listens to me. You know, my wife doesn't listen to me, my dog doesn't listen to me, nobody listens to me. I don't have that deficit. I used to, but I don't have it. That's why I can be wrong. People like the other people, they can't be wrong because my identity, you're not attacking me. I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You know, like,
right.
But you're not going to lose everything. You're not going to lose everything if you're wrong.
Well, that's a weird thing. You're not losing anything because if you're wrong and you're becoming to learn what's right, you're gaining everything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the key part. It's like, I want to know what I know so I'm more right about feeling good about what I know. Not because I want to feel right and you're wrong. I mean, it's a common phrase in counseling is, are you looking more to be right than you are to being important? Sorry. What was that?
That was your talk is over. I gotta end this because I don't want to run into Steve. So okay, did that work? Was that okay? All right, let me move on because this is important. I really need to talk to you guys about something. Movie night. I'm axing. I'm sorry. Movie night was a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wanted to continue it, but I can't continue it with that laying on, you know, in back of my mind. Am I going to get shut down? Am I going to get shut down this time? I can't do it. I can't. It's too much stress and it's putting marks on my channel. And I just can't do it anymore because the more I researched again this week about it, they're not going to allow me to even play public domain. It's been luck these last 3 weeks that I didn't get shut down sooner. And it was because those shows we showed before were not main studios. But the minute I showed a main studio, Universal Studios picture, they stopped me. They put the copyright on me. It was not considered a strike. Okay. But if I have enough of those, it could. So, and I can't deal with the stress. It was just, it's too much to try. I like perfection. And having it stopped 3-4 minutes into the stream was not good for me. So we have another option. Okay. Do we do a Friday night game night, which will not get shut down? It's a possibility that I would do that if I know that I can get 20 or more people involved to come and watch that type of show. I'll do one. If not, if we're just gonna get 10 people there, I know I love you guys, my 10, my 10, but it has to be more worth it because that's my Friday night too. Okay. I was giving up my Friday nights, and now I give up my Sunday nights. So my husband only has the weekends off. So, it's very give and take. So this is going to be something we'll talk about more, because if everybody's in on it, I'll be in on it. I'll go for it if I can get people there. And everybody loves trivia. Everybody loves the games we do together. So I think it's a big possibility that we do a game night on Friday nights. So that's it. With that, you're going to start seeing changes. I told you earlier, I am decided to rebrand the channel. I'm not rebranding the content, okay? Just the channel name. After doing extensive research into the analytics, and I had been ignoring them for the most part, but now that I've gone through and saw, I'm not getting searched at all, okay, because of my name. Nobody wants to see a hairy man show. Okay.
Well, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I am going to be changing that. I have a couple of ideas for names already. And Sass over there is going to be my new mascot instead of Harry over here. They're brother and sister, okay? He's not changing. Anyway, so that's going to be happening too. All these little changes. And I was thinking of doing it in July, but it's not. We're going to be doing that now, as soon as I start changing things out, because it's going to take a little while, and Sass needs a couple of things done. And so I hope you all stick around for those changes, and I'll keep putting out the content if y'all keep coming. So, gentlemen,
thank you, Nikki.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Leon.
Thank you guys so much
you guys too
for being here. Everybody, go to Squatchy TV, but first, hit that like button, dang it. Hit it, subscribe, and please share in your groups. Tell them to come watch me, please. And I promise I'll do good. So I see you in the next chat. Love you guys.